Why he said, when he ascended up on high, he led the captivity captive and gave gifts to men. What does this verse mean? Who are the captives? Who received the gifts? And up and high, where is up and high? Which location is that? Okay, let's add Psalms 68 verse 18. If you just compare it to the other verse, you see that the red words are almost exactly the same. The green words are also exactly the same. And that's why it's called a parallel verse, because they are the same. Those verses are talking about the same topic. The only thing that's not the same is gifts, because in one verse it's about receiving gifts and the other verse is giving gifts. So there's a difference, but we will see that's not a real difference. The first verse is a verse found in the New Testament, and it's a reference to the psalm verse found in the Old Testament. And to figure out what that psalm verse means, we have to look into various things, and the first step is always context. So what we are going to do next is looking at the verses that are surrounding verse 18. Okay, I suggest you first stop this video and read all the verses and then start the video again. Okay, this set of verses is all about some sort of war, because chariots and angels, that's just a scenery of war, that's just an army, and captives, that's also about the army. So this is about some sort of conquest. The word Bashan is mentioned 3 times, and it is of some importance. It's one of the keys that unlocks the meaning of this study. Bashan is a region, a mountain region, where there were a lot of descendants of the Nephilim living. The Nephilim are the fallen angels from all the way back to Genesis, and those angels mated with human women, and you got some sort of hybrid species between mankind and angels. You can read more about them in Deuteronomy 1 verse 4, Deuteronomy 3 verses 10 and 11, Joshua 9, 10, and Joshua 12 verses 4 and 5. You will see that all those verses are references to Bashan and to the fallen angels or the offspring of the fallen angels. So the whole context and the conquest in Psalm 68:17 is very much related to Bashan, and obviously not really Bashan, because that was just a mountain, but those who dwell in those mountains. I find the wording of those verses, because captivity, captive means something like captive. That sounds like war that have been recently taken prisoners. Then the green words you have left. Well, if you look at other translations, the same might be a little bit more clear, like somewhere. The last verse, as we will see, of the whole Christian Bible, like then it is took prisoners into captivity. That's also a little bit odd, because prisoners
because
are always in captivity.
means
If they were
something
not in
like
captivity, they would be
prisoners
not
of
called
war that
prisoners.
have been recently taken.
So
Then
that's a little
the
bit
green
odd,
words
but
you have
still a little
led
bit
is
better.
about
Well, that's
the
all we
same
have, so
prisoners
that's
of
we have to
war
work
being
with.
led somewhere.
If we look up
Then as
the
you
word
will
captivity in a
see, yeah,
dictionary,
just
we'll
paraded
find it's an
around
action.
like
It's the action of taking
spoils of
people
war.
in captivity. So people who are free are
because
taken into captivity.
captive means something
And the word
like
captive is just
prisoners of war that have been
completed
recently
action
taken.
of that. So
Then the
green
green
words
you have
taken into
led
captivity
is about
the same prisoners
and
of
that
war
action
being
is completed. So
led
they are now
somewhere,
like
as you will see,
imprisoned.
they are just
or
paraded
arrested,
around
if you
like.
want it.
So the
Spoils of war.
first word, captivity, means the action of taking them in
Because
captivity.
captive
Means
is
something like that action is
prisoners of war
successfully
that have been
completed.
recently taken.
So the enemy
Then
is
the green words
you have
imprisoned.
led is about the same prisoners of war.
We must understand this as the
led
army of God
somewhere.
is
Then as
successfully
we will see,
capturing the enemy.
they are just paraded
The army of
around
God
like
is making prisoners
spoils
of war.
In ancient times, the
Because
victorious general
captivity
paraded the
captive
prisoners
means
for all to
something
see.
like
The general
prisoners
also
of war
received
that have
gifts,
been recently
spoils
taken.
of war.
Then the
That's
green
in Psalm
words you have
68
led is
verse
about
18.
the same prisoners
The
of
general
war
also
being
handed out gifts
led
during the parade.
somewhere. Then as you
We
will
find
see,
that in
they are
Ephesians
just
4
paraded
verse
around
11.
like
Ephesians 4
spoils
verse
of war.
9 describes two conquests. First, Jesus descends
Because
into the grave
captivity
and defeated
captive
death.
means something like
Then he ascended and
prisoners
defeated
of
the
war that
enemy
have
on
been
the
recently
mountain.
taken. Then the green words you have led is
What are lower
about
regions?
the same
people
prisoners of
say,
war being
yes, the low regions
led
are the grave.
somewhere. Then
Jesus
as you will see,
descended in the grave,
they are
he
just
died.
paraded around like
Those are the low regions.
spoils of war.
But depending on the translation, the Bible translation, there's another.
Because captivity
For
captive
example, I
means
listed
something
two
like
translations here on
prisoners
this
of war that have
page.
been recently taken.
And the first
Then
translation
the
you have to
green
look
words
at
you
the
have led
comma in
is
red
about
after regions.
the
There
same
it says
prisoners of war
that
being
Christ descended in the
led
low region,
somewhere.
which
Then as
is
you will
called
see, they are
planet
just
Earth.
paraded around like
And the
spoils
other
of war.
translation said Christ descended to our lowly world.
Because captivity
So
captive
that's
means something like
pointing to the
prisoners of
planet,
war that
not
have been
to
recently taken.
the grave. But
Then the
whole
green
planet.
words
He
you have
descended
led
from
is about
heaven up
the
high
same prisoners of war being
to downwards
led
to the
somewhere. Then
world
as you
we live
will
on.
see,
And
they are
that
just
interpretation
paraded
isn't that
around
bad
like
if you read the context, the
spoils of
verses
war.
surrounding this verse. We read that he went up all the way
Because
to heaven,
captivity
and
captive
he
means
came down
something
all
like
the way from heaven to earth.
prisoners
So
of war that have been
that's
recently
an
taken.
interpretation
Then the
that
green
you could
words you
keep
have
in the back
led
of your
is
mind.
about the same
So the
prisoners
summary
of war
of the
being
meaning of the very first
led
verse we looked
somewhere.
at is
And
that
as you will see,
the army of
they are
God,
just paraded
of
around
which
like
Christ is a general,
spoils of war,
has conquered the enemy. And now
because
Christ is
captivity captive
riding
means
up
something
front,
like prisoners of
and
war that
following
have
him
been
are his
recently
soldiers
taken.
to
Then the
and
green
the
words
prisoners
you
of
have
war,
led is
the enemy.
about the same prisoners of war
And that
being
is
led
way
somewhere. Then as
that
you
it
will
was done
see,
in ancient
they are
times.
just
So
paraded
this verse
around
may
like
not mean so much to
spoils
us,
of war.
but in ancient times, when a king won the war, he
Because
paraded down the
captivity
streets
captive
with
means something
the
like
treasures he has,
prisoners
spoils
of war that have been
and
recently taken.
the enemy has
Then the
enslaved.
green
Just
words
a
you
big
have led is
show,
about
big parade, and
the same
that
prisoners
is
of
just
war
a
being
display of victory.
led somewhere.
And that's
Then
what
as you
this
will
verse
see,
is about.
they are just paraded
But
around like
this verse is not
spoils of war.
about two countries going to war, two normal earthly countries. No,
Because
captivity,
captive means
Bashan.
something like
And Bashan
prisoners of war that have been recently
evil,
taken. Then the green
also
word you have led
evil,
is
because
about
Bashan is
the same prisoners
very
of
much
war
related
being led somewhere.
fallen
Then as you
angels.
will see, they
And
are just
when you say
paraded
fallen
around like
angels, you think about Satan,
spoils of
but
war.
also things like demons. So
because
it's
captivity
spiritual evil.
captive
So
means something
it's
like
not so much that
prisoners of war that
Satan
have been
was
recently taken.
killed or his demons
Then
were
the green
slaughtered or
words
something like
you
that,
have
but
led
it
is
more
about
like
the same
Jesus
prisoners of war being
conquered,
led
defeated
somewhere.
evil in
Then
a
as you
general
will see,
sense. So
they are just paraded
you
around
could,
like
yeah, well,
spoils of
everybody
war.
sees things like this a little bit different, but you could also say Christ has
Because
conquered
captivity captive
sin,
means something like
or demons, or
prisoners of
Satan,
war that
or
have been
fallen
recently
angels.
taken.
But once again,
Then
it's
the
about
green words you have
the
led is
defeat of
about
the forces of
the
evil,
same prisoners of war
and
being
with that,
led
a lot of things
somewhere.
happen.
Then as you
Because
will see,
look,
they are just
my
paraded
opinion, a
around
lot of
like
people on earth are
spoils
evil,
of
but
war.
they are not really evil from themselves. They are like
Because captivity
manipulated
captive means
by the forces
something
of evil.
like
They are indoctrinated,
prisoners of
they are
war that have been
misguided, they
recently
are,
taken.
well,
Then
maybe
the
possessed
green
is a
words
little bit
you have
strong,
led
but I
is
mean,
about the
yeah,
same
it's just
prisoners
my
of war
idea that there
being
are several groups of
led
people on earth.
somewhere.
Some
Then as you
people are
will
just
see,
good,
they are just paraded
and
around
some people
like
are just plain evil.
spoils of war.
But there's a whole group within, in the middle, that is just
Because captivity
misguided.
captive means
They are
something
just
like prisoners of
you
war that have been
propaganda,
recently
and
taken.
they do things and they
Then the
believe
green
things that
words
are
you have
wrong,
led
but
is
not
about
because they
the
say,
same prisoners
I
of war
want to
being
rebel against Christ,
led
I want to
somewhere.
do
Then as you
bad,
will
and I want to
see,
do this
they are
bad
just
thing and that
paraded
bad thing,
around like
and I don't care what
spoils
good or
of
bad
war.
is, I will do that. No, a lot of people are just misguided.
Because
They
captivity
think they are
captive
doing good
means
things,
something like
but it's just a
prisoners of
massive
war that have been recently
propaganda
taken.
machine.
Then the
And propaganda
green
we
words
see
you
in
have
earthly
led
wars.
is about the same
But I
prisoners
think
of
you agree
war
with me
being
that Satan is
led
a big
somewhere. Then as you will see, they are
liar.
just paraded
He is
around
just
like
fantastic at
spoils of war.
propaganda. And I think a lot of people fall for it. But in the end times,
Because
when Jesus
captivity captive means
takes those
something like
propaganda makers, so
prisoners
to
of
speak,
war that have
captive,
been recently
then I
taken.
think a lot
Then
of people
the
will
green words you have
see the
led
truth.
is
When
about
those propaganda
the same prisoners of war being
rhetoric
led
is taken
somewhere.
away,
Then as you
people will start to see
they are just paraded around
what is
like
really going on. And I
spoils
think
of
that a lot
war.
of people who were, let's say, a little bit on the dark side will
Because
move to
captivity
the side
captive
of light.
means something
Because they
like
never really were
prisoners of
evil,
war
but
that
they
have
were
been recently
tricked
taken.
into evil and
Then the
manipulated
green
in evil.
words
So I
you have
think
led is about
this
the
verse,
same
this
prisoners
chapter
of
is
war
actually
being
very positive. It's
led
not just about
somewhere. Then as you will see, they are
Jesus just parading
around
around and
like
say, hey, see, I
spoils of
killed
war.
5,000 demons and I imprisoned 10,000 of them.
Because
Yes,
captivity
that's
captive means
what it's
something
saying,
like
literally saying.
prisoners
But
of war that have been
the
recently
real meaning is
taken.
that
Then the green
Jesus
words you have
made
led
a
is
big
about the same prisoners of
win,
war
a big
being
victory on evil.
led
So
somewhere.
I think
Then as
this
you
is a
will
very
see, they are just
positive
paraded
verse,
around
but the
like
way it's
spoils
explained
of
is
war.
just a way how ancient kings did
Because
things
captivity
after they were
captive means
victorious.
something
Today
like
when the
prisoners of
general
war
wins
that
a
have
war,
been recently taken,
well, you just
then
read
the green
on
words
internet
you have
or
led
you see
is
it on
about
television.
the
So
same
like,
prisoners of
look, we
war
won,
being
and here, look, here
led
are our
somewhere.
prisoners
Then
of
as you
war.
will
That's
see,
how it
they are
works
just
today.
paraded
But back
around
then,
like
the king
spoils of
paraded
war.
those enemies through the street, and everybody cheered, and everybody was happy.
Because
Everybody
captive
knew
means something
the
like
enemy was defeated because
prisoners
they
of
didn't
war that
have
have been
internet,
recently
they didn't
taken.
have YouTube, they
Then the
didn't have
green
Twitter
words you
or
have led is about
some
the
news channel.
same
It was
prisoners of
just,
war being
you know,
led
seeing is
somewhere.
believing.
Then as you will see,
So,
they are just
okay,
paraded around
I
like
hope all of
spoils of
this
war.
clears up what that verse actually is about. See you
Because
next time.
captive means something like